الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه، وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له، وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفوته من خلقه وحبيبه، قد بلغ الرسالة وأدى الأمانة ونصح الأمة وكشف الغمة وجاهد في سبيل دينه حتى أتاه اليقين، فاللهم اجزه عنا وعن والدينا وعن الإسلام والمسلمين خير ما جازيت به نبيا عن قومه ورسولا عن أمته. اللهم أحينا على سنته وأمتنا على ملته، واحشرنا تحت لوائه وأوردنا حوضه، واسقنا من يده الشريفة شربة هنيئة لا نظمأ بعدها أبدا. أما بعد, we have been tracking the reasons, the ailments, the diseases, the shortcomings that plagued our Ummah and caused it to be in the crisis situation in which our Ummah is nowadays and has been for years. While reading, I went back and I came across a hadith that many of us may know. The hadith says, نعمتان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس. There are two bounties that many people wrong themselves by not using them or by squandering them. Two blessings that Allah has given us as humans. Most of people squander them and do not benefit from them. الصحة والفراغ, health and spare time. Spare time is a killer because, as Imam al-Shafi'i says, وَنَفْسُكَ إِن لَمْ تَشْغَلْهَا بِالْحَقِّ شَغَلَتْكَ بِالْبَاطِلِ. Our Ummah is suffering badly from these two ailments: the squandering of health, wealth, resources, time. Whatever Allah blesses us with, we abuse and we do not use it for our own benefit. And the soul that Allah has given us to use to make judgment, to balance between right and wrong, good and evil, and to choose the right thing to do, is so much pushed and immersed into whatever is pleasant, fun, and easy, instead of what is productive, what is efficient, what could add to my value as a human, to my community, as the society in which I live, to the nation in which I live. And a story comes to me about a Japanese man, young man. He actually died at about 34 years of age. 34 years of age. When he was much younger, in his early 20s, he looked at how the West is roaming the earth. We talk about 1800s. Somewhere in the 1800s, he looks and he finds that the PowerPoint for the West is one thing that puts them apart from the rest of the world. And what was it in his mind? It was the combustion engine. The engine that runs cars, trucks, airplanes, all whatever moves mechanically, it's moved by an engine. So he said, our Ummah, the Japanese nation, doesn't have anything close, nothing. So he said, I'm going to dedicate my life to see how do I introduce this to my nation. See, in a nation that has people who think like this, you get Japan. In contrast, in our nations, you get people who travel to find something useful, they buy it for themselves. Our leaders, so-called Muslim leaders of Muslim nations, when they travel and they find something attractive or good or useful, they buy it for themselves, for their elite surrounding. That's it. Whether it is a plane or a train, anything. So he travels to Germany on a scholarship to study engineering. And after he had finished his first degree, which is a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering, he is given another scholarship for the master and the PhD. And he doesn't want to go forward with studying. What does he do? He goes to factories that manufacture engines and cars. There he learns what he went to learn in Germany. He writes in his story that I used to spend hours trying to placate anyone who has a piece of knowledge that I need for my nation. Whatever they ask me to do, I would do. Look at the spirit, look at the determination, look at the resolve. He would say, I would work for hours, and after everybody's gone, I would sit down to write notes about what I have learned today. Drawing everything he has seen, noting everything he has learned. Doing this a few years, he learned all what it takes to produce an engine. Then he needs money to take an engine to a garage or somewhere to disassemble it and reassemble it and see if it will work. So he takes about 6 months disassembling an engine and reassembling an engine. Whenever he disassembles one piece, he would note, what is this piece? What does it do? Where does it fit? Where does it get its own resources? What kind of fuel is needed for this machine? And so on and so forth. He took the whole engine into its smallest of pieces. Bolts and nuts were also written. Then he puts the engine back together in the opposite direction of disassembling. He reassembles the same engine. He turns it on, it works. So he talks to his people in the Japanese embassy. The ambassador takes his message to the foreign ministry. The foreign ministry takes the message to the emperor, and the emperor calls him in to reward him for his achievement. He goes to the emperor's invitation, and everybody is waiting for this genius man who has brought Japan something it never had. He comes before the emperor and he says, I did not do anything. I only copied and brought with me a sample engine. I am not going to accept any reward until I manufacture my own engine with Japanese ideas, Japanese hands, and Japanese materials. And he did the first engine for Japan. From there forward, Japan became a power to contend with. I am telling you this story because it's a story of education that is real, unlike the education we have in much and most of the Muslim lands. We have a lot of schools, but no real education. A lot of universities, but no real learning or research. A lot of conferences are being held, recycling whatever everybody has been saying or doing, but not producing anything original or genuine or local. We are feeding on the crumbs. This pattern, I call it filling the holes. We are just filling the holes that we feel plaguing our ummah, the holes of ignorance, the holes of backwardness, the holes of inaptness and weakness. We are only filling the holes so that we can clap to each other and we can pat our own backs and sing the national anthems wherever you live and go to sleep. And sleeping is what we have been doing much of our history. Since the fall of Granada, we are an ummah sleeping. So what do people who sleep that long live on? They live on useless fantasy dreams. One day we will be this, one day we will be like this, one day we will achieve that, and another day will. So we live in those fantasies, but we do not achieve the nuts and the bolts that could make this fantasy part of our reality. We don't pick serious issues and say, in 10 years, we want to manufacture our own cars. In 20 years, we want to manufacture our own trains. In 30 years, we want to manufacture our own jet flights, jet planes. Of course, we all know that, except for Turkey, maybe Malaysia, maybe Indonesia, maybe Singapore. They are seriously engaging the world of industry and technology much deeper than the core of the Muslim world, which is the Arab land. You know, when I was young, I don't know about you, but they used to teach us something called the map of the Arab world. The map of the Arab world. If you remember, you were in school in the 50s and 60s, you would remember the map of the... Where is this map, by the way? Even the map doesn't recognize us anymore, let alone political establishments. We do not count. We are not on the map. And what do? We try to erase Israel from the map and put Palestine. So the word Palestine may appear on the Arab maps, but in reality, we are working with Israel to erase what we put as a word on the map. This is as miserable as it can get. I don't want to bore you more with lots of phenomena that reflect nothing but inaptness and accustoming ourselves and making peace with our ignorance, making peace with our oppressive regimes, making peace with our backwardness, making peace with being in the trail of nations. You look at the ranking of our schools compared to world ranking, schools, universities, we are way in the bottom of the world. And if there's no education, everything else will fall out of place. Because you're not investing, you're not teaching your children to become competitive in the world economy, in the world business, in the world technology, in the world of communication, in the world of productivity. And at the end, you combine all what the Arab world produces in dollar value compared along with oil and gas and resources, and multiplied so many times, it will not equate the gross national product of one European poor country called Spain. But we talk big. How do we do this? When we note how weak we are and we want our dreams to come true, we brag about our past. Even the Arab used to say, ليس الفتى من قال كان أبي ولكن الفتى من قال ها أنا ذا. A man really is not someone who says, my father used to do this, my grandfather used this, my great-grandfather did this. That's not the man. The real man is one who says, here I am, that's what I do, that's what I produce. All the knowledge that the West picked from us when the Arab rule of Europe, Southern Europe in particular, started to decline, they started to divide among themselves, compete on small pieces of European land, and some of them resorted to outside sources that they were fighting together to support them. The same issues we are suffering from today. So Iran uses Russia and other forces, and the other Gulf countries use America against Iran as a threat, and Egypt is using this, Libya is using Turkey now, before that France and other countries. So we are working deliberately and diligently against the sunan of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Simply put, the Quran says, وَلَا تَنَازَعُوا فَتَفْشَلُوا. Don't you dispute and fight lest you would fall and you would fail. You would be miserable. That's exactly what we do. We're fighting. And we're fighting over the most trivial of issues. We're fighting over borders. We're fighting over resources. Recently, 2-3 Middle Eastern countries, or maybe 4, who do not really constitute real countries, right, in terms of population, education, power, gross national products, economy, military, nothing. Even combined together, they have nothing to stand on. They are fighting the weakest of Arab countries for dominance, and most probably for more wealth. Emirates and Saudi Arabia are fighting Yemen. Iran is using Yemen and Syria to launch wars against the rest of the Arab world. Everybody is having their own patrons from outside to give them the weapons, and they are pouring the trillions of dollars on these useless wars. What are we destroying? Our wealth, our resources, and our Arab neighbors. It's so much for wasting our life and wasting our resources. We all read the story of a person who raised a bear. You know, a bear, polar bear, and the bear found him sleepy, and a fly was coming on this man's face. So he keeps, waving the fly away, it doesn't go. So the bear, with 1-ton hand slam, he wanted to kill the fly. What does he do? He slams the man on his face, rendering him dead. we are good at hurting ourselves, and we are not good defending the weakest amongst us or even ourselves. Our Arab leaders have fought a war with Iran that we had no bones in. It's a fight that the Arabs never had a bone in, artificially making sectarian issues the issues of the war to arouse the spiritual emotions of the Sunni Muslims against Iran. 8 years of war, destroying the lives of 1 million fighters on each side. Who benefits from all of this? Funded by the Gulf countries, and the weapons came from their interlocutors in Washington, who wanted to revenge from Iran without spilling one drop of American blood. And they wanted to revenge against the hostage crisis of the late 70s and early 80s, okay? And this was the biggest interference in American election in the history of the United States. So they wanted to revenge, but they didn't want to lose their own blood or their own treasure. What do? They sell weapons to Saudi Arabia and to Kuwait and to the Gulf, and the other guys, they fund that war for 8 long years. Of course, Iran didn't come a winner. Iraq didn't come a winner. Iraq became very weakened, as we know, and the rest is history. When you become weak, you become the prey for anyone who wants to eat something. So we are working very hard to make our nations the weakest on earth, and superpowers are not looking for big fights. They only want poor nations to get the resources because it's much less expensive. If you count the number of people America lost and the West coalition in Afghanistan since 9/11 until today, it comes about 2,400, 2,500, maybe 3,000, right? But the damage to both Afghanistan and Pakistan and to the regional security structure in this area, and the deterioration and the breakdown of the fabric of the Afghani and Pakistani society, now it renders Pakistan itself weaker than pushing back against China now, announcing to annex the entirety of Kashmir, a wound that never healed since 1947. We have to wake up. We have to wake up. We have to learn some lessons. But we are so much deep in our sleep that our dreams substitute for our miserable reality. So you get lots of Muslims dreaming of victory and the white horses and the demise of this empire and the demise of this power, as if their misery is our victory. As if those who don't wish you well, they are going to be punished and pushed back by secret powers that we don't want to know. But they are only going to be pushed by our power, which we don't have, and unfortunately, we do not work for. What good is it that everybody is running like a house on fire, but nobody is trying to put out the fire? What happens to a crowded place when everybody shouts fire, fire, everybody's running, stampede, they kill each other. And when they don't kill each other for a stampede, when somebody draws a cartoon of the Prophet ﷺ, we demonstrate, right? Do you remember the Danish cartoon? We demonstrate, and in our demonstrations, we kill Muslims in the demonstrations. Ummah that does not act rationally is an ummah in real crisis, and all of this because of two reasons. And those are going to be the bottom lines that I will try to discuss in the next few weeks, inshallah. One reason is the lack of education and the lack of awareness. An ummah that has solid education cannot settle for a dream as a replacement to reality. It cannot settle for chewing the glory of the past instead of building the glory of tomorrow. We need to resolve this issue. We need to address this issue. Education, and awareness are two major foundations for any ummah that wants a place on the map and a place in the civilization around which we are living, and to remove the impediment of ignorance, backwardness, inaptness, and utter weakness and helplessness. The second issue is we must remove by all means possible all powers that stand against our yearning for education, for glory, for a future for our children. We cannot continue to have peace with repressive regimes. They have rendered our nation to the bottom of the bottom. Some of you may think that the Sheikh started to just drift because he is focused more on politics than religion. And this is one of the baits that we have been sold and we have bought. It is like the bait of the passport, the borders, the travel rules, the nationality, the flags, the pride, and the deep sleep into our dreams so that we have no idea about our reality. If we want to know our reality, we need to read the Washington Post, the New York Times, the Guardian, the Economist, and all foreign written news sources to tell us how miserable we are. We don't even research our own misery because we're not allowed to. Our governments will not even give us the data to study our misery. How do we recover? We have to remove the source of our misery. These are the governments, but with that, we should never ignore the fact that we, the people, have abandoned the power of collective will. And I will give you a couple of examples, very real examples that we all could agree to. Number one, the example of the will of the Afghani people, to whom I have to tip my hat and lower my head in show of respect. Despite the lack of systems even, any systems in their nation, when they were attacked by a superpower that was second to none militarily at the time, their will was stronger than the weapons they were fought with. And don't be deceived that, but America gave them stingers. Stingers came at the end, but they fought without stingers for years. Never weakened, never succumbing to helplessness, even though they were weak and helpless. but they never believed that they should succumb or surrender to helplessness and weakness. They always believed in the collective will of the people. And when they stood together, Allah broke the back of that empire in front of the weak, helpless, uneducated community that is without even a system. They didn't have a system. They had to invent a system just for defending their country. The second example is the example of Turkey. Turkey lived under Ataturk, a secular, brutal secular regime that removed even the Arabic language letters that was the alphabet of their local language to disconnect them completely from the Arabic culture, Islam, the Quran, to destroy their link to any history or glory of their past. So they started to learn new alphabet like children, adults. And they started to adjust. And this is something that is ominous about our peoples, that we adjust to any new thing. We have a saying in Egypt, I am from Egypt. We have a saying in Egypt, اللي يتجوز أمي هقول له يا عمي. Anyone who marries my mom, I will call him my uncle. So any ruler who takes power by hook or crook, we are going to adjust as if he is part of our family. That's now a new family. And the more we try to accommodate the cancer, the bigger the cancer is growing. And now it's eating our core organs. The resources of our nations is gone. Even the wealthy Arab nations that used to have the wealth of the oil are now not as wealthy as they used to. They are living in debt. And they are shamed for having weapons they cannot use even. But they are playing the regional superpowers. And we are watching, and as if anything that takes hold over time becomes part of who we are. No. Aggression against neighbors should never be part of our culture. Destroying our resources should never be part of our culture. Destroying our neighbors' nations should never be part of our culture. Wise nations lessen the number of enemies they have to manage the less number of enemies they must. Some of these nations have defined Islam itself as their enemy, and they started to adjust to corruption. So how do we fill those holes and replace those vacuums? We resort as people to imitation. So our peoples are looking for sports stars, electronic games, Western haircuts, Western clothing, Western style, Western this and Western that, until the West itself says, these people are just scavenging under the table. Kick them far. It's like an unwanted dog under the table of the dinner in a family house. How far do we continue to accept to eat the crumbs that are not even available? One Arab poet once says, وَلِلْحُرِّيَّةِ الْحَمْرَاءِ بَابٌ بِكُلِّ يَدٍ مُضَرَّةٍ يُدَقُّ. Freedom has a red gate that you have to go through. You have to keep knocking on that gate until it opens widely. This is how you gain your freedom and you have your will and you develop a collective action. We need to wake up from our sleep and to define what is our task. Like this Japanese young man who developed the first Japanese engine made by Japanese materials and Japanese hands. We need people who are willing to take the initiatives and defy their difficult realities like the Afghans did. We need people to have the will like the Palestinian people in Gaza. The more the siege becomes difficult, the more ingenuity you see them coming up with. This is how people change their future from the misery of the present and the dreams of the glory of the past and the diving in the past so that we don't see the future. This is the steps that we need to take. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open our hearts to see truth as truth and follow it, and to see falsehood as false and to discontinue to follow it. Allahumma ameen. الحمد لله وكفى والصلاة والسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله وصفوته من خلقه وحبيبه. اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن اتبع سنته بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. Brothers and sisters, اثنان مغبون فيهما كثير من الناس. Two things that most people are defrauded of: health and spare time. If we put our energy where it belongs, if we put our knowledge that we have to practice, our future, even our immediate tomorrow, is not going to be like yesterday. It's not going to be like today. All what it takes is to believe in our faith, to believe what Allah told us, إِنَّ اللَّهَ مَعَ الَّذِينَ اتَّقَوْا وَالَّذِينَ هُمْ مُحْسِنُونَ. Allah is always with those who practice righteousness and practice excellence. Do your best. Whatever you do, do it in the best of ways. Don't only say something good. Do whatever you do in the best of ways. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَقُلِ اعْمَلُوا, and say, O Muhammad, do work. Work as hard as you can. Work as best as you can. Why? فَسَيَرَى اللَّهُ عَمَلَكُمْ. Allah, His Messenger, and the believers will see what you have done on the Day of Judgment. Don't waste your health or energy. Don't waste your resources. Put it where it belongs. Now, the internet has sucked up many physical stores. You've witnessed Shoppers closed already. Safeway has closed. And the internet is sucking all of these businesses that we lived with for years for the internet. And Mr. Bezos of Amazon is very happy. Is very happy. We need to turn the corner for what is best for us. We are the people who created the wealth of the internet companies. And I'm going to tell you why I'm using this. We have purchased from the internet, and it became convenient, easy, and definitely, in many cases, cheaper, in some cases, better quality. We created the internet market. We can go back and reinvent the corner family store in the neighborhood, because these are our people. These are our families. These are our workers. When we let them die, and because none of us works at Chopper, and none of us works, you will find that the rest of the other stores are also sucked up, and you will try to find a job, you will not find it. You will have to go to Mr. Bezos to give you potential interview, but no job, because he will be saturated. Likewise, this is in the economy. In politics, it is the same. We give too much power to governments, they abuse it, they abuse us, they abuse our resources, and what do we say? Who's going to become the president? Nasser. Who else? Who's going to replace Sisi? We don't have anybody to match. Who is going to replace Yasser Arafat? Who's going to replace Saddam? And time and again, Allah is showing us those people definitely are disposable and useless. And in many, if not all cases, they are harmful to your interest. But we continue the suckling of our own blood being sucked out of us in terms of dollar amount, productivity, technology, learning, advancing. So we become like orphans running in an open-ended camp, not achieving anything, and not even making the food for the day. We need to wake up and start focus on the power of collective will. We need to learn from this society. This society, the power of the people is the power of organizing, working together. But we shy from organizing with other people, which is our only way to push against corruption and against demolishing the human resources. We have already demolished the environment in which we live. We're talking about recycling everything, but we are not even making ends meet in dealing with the environmental corruption that we have created. Why? Because like children, we love what is easy, we love what is pleasant, we love what is cheap, and we think that these are the only criteria, but sustainability is not an issue. Tomorrow is not in the horizon. Future resources, who cares? Future generation will take care about it. So we have to change how we think and how we calculate our future and how we make decisions. Your dollar is part of your power. Where you spend your dollar tells about what is important for you. Brothers, I think we understand now much of the issues. We've been talking about this issue for weeks. The crisis of our Ummah, where it comes from. It is about time that we start sitting down and talking about what can we do as a community to rid the world of corruption and start looking for a righteous generation to come back to power and to lead the world to real peace, real tranquility, real balance. We are the leaders of peace if we live our faith. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala open our heart to the truth. اللهم اهدنا فيمن هديت وعافنا فيمن عافيت وتولنا فيمن توليت وقنا واصرف عنا شر ما قضيت اللهم اقسم لنا من خشيتك ما تحول به بيننا وبين معصيتك ومن طاعتك ما تبلغنا به جنتك ومن اليقين ما تهون به علينا مصائب الدنيا ومتعنا اللهم بأسماعنا وأبصارنا وقوتنا ما أحييتنا واجعله الوارث منا واجعل ثأرنا على من ظلمنا اللهم ارحمنا وارحم موتانا وموتى المسلمين واشف مرضانا ومرضى المسلمين وانصر عبادك المجاهدين في كل مكان اللهم عليك بالطغاة الجبارين اللهم أعنا على أنفسنا اللهم أعنا على أعدائنا اللهم أعنا على تحدياتنا اللهم اقسم لنا من رحمتك ما تبلغنا به مرضاتك يا رب العالمين. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم، فستذكرون ما أقول لكم وأفوض أمري إلى الله، إن الله بصير بالعباد. وأقم الصلاة.